Yo, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of the SWUS. Happy New Year to you all. By the time you're watching this, it will be after midnight. I'm recording this on New Year's Eve evening. So happy New Year. Can't thank you guys enough for this year, man. We grew a lot. Those of you that take the time out of your day to watch the channel and support, I seriously can never thank you enough. This channel has changed my life and making these videos. I love it. This is my life's work. I knew as soon as I started doing it that this is what I wanted to do, and I truly love doing it. So thank you so much for the growth this year. Thank you for the continued support. Let's have ourselves a nice New Year's Day here. We got 3 college football playoff games. As far as New Year's Eve, I lost. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I won Washington plus 1.5 on a crazy game. Lost South Carolina. Won the LSU over. Right now, I'm 2-1 right now. I'm waiting for Penn State minus 11. They're up 24-14 right now, but Boise State's driving at the time of recording. So hopefully Penn State cover the minus 11 to make it a 3-1 night. If they don't, it'll be a 2-2 night. Yeah, let's have a good one. Thanks again. Happy New Year. 3 games. Let's do it. Welcome to the SWUS. Hey, get the sauce. First up, we got the 4 seed versus the 5 seed here. Arizona State against Texas. This one's being played at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. This is the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. So the 4 seed versus 5 seed here. Arizona State is catching 12.5 pretty much across the board. Total sitting at 51.5 pretty much across the board. So let's take a look at the pie charts here, or the donut charts, I'm sorry. According to the data, action's coming in pretty heavily on the Texas side. Over 65% of the tickets, about 70% of the money. As I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup, and we'll start with the Texas offense against the Arizona State defense. On paper, these two units are not that far apart. Texas offense, 26th in yards per play, 30th in success rate, 19th in OFEI. The Arizona State defense, 30th, 70th, 34th. So obviously the Texas offense has the edge, but based on the full season production combined with strength of schedule, it's really not that huge of a gap. Quinn Ewers has been a little bit underwhelming this year, 7.6 yards per pass attempt, 24 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. What concerns me is right here. The Texas passing numbers when they've seen top 30 rated pass defenses. That's 5 games. In those 5 games, they're averaging just 245 passing yards per game, success rate per dropback under 37%, under 6.8 yards per pass attempt. Those are not good numbers. So when they've seen pass defenses rated in the top 30, they've struggled to throw the ball. Arizona State actually is in the top 30. They're 29th. Here's the thing. These games are against Georgia twice. They're against Texas A&M, Kentucky. I mean, Arizona State is technically in the top 30. They're 29th, but I wouldn't put Arizona State's pass defense on the same level as Georgia or Texas A&M. Obviously, it may be a small step down, but it is a step down in competition. But we do have to point out that in the first round against Clemson, I mean, it's not like Quinn Ewers lit it up through the air. 17 of 24, 202 yards, a touchdown, a pick, a 147 passer rating. Not that this is a bad game, but that's not what beat Clemson. It wasn't Texas' passing attack that beat Clemson. So will Arizona State's defense be able to keep Quinn Ewers from piecing him up through the air? I would have to lean towards no. I mean, look at these graphics right here. On the left side, you have games against Mississippi State, Kansas, and BYU. All 3 of those games were at home. In those games, they allowed 275 passing yards per game, over 53% success rate per dropback, 8.6 yards per attempt. They struggled to defend the pass in those 3 games. In all of their other games combined, they held opponents to just 197.5 passing yards per game, 40.1% success rate, under 5.6 yards per pass attempt. So in all their other games, they actually played solid defense against the pass. In fact, they played good defense against the pass. Here's the thing. Didn't see the toughest competition. I mean, if you look at their schedule, there's not a ton of dynamic passing attacks here. In fact, Kansas is the only top 25 offense they saw all season. And what really concerns me here for the Arizona State defense is the lack of a pass rush. This is a terrible pass rush. They really struggle to put pressure on the quarterback. They're 130th in the country in pressure rate, 115th in sack rate, 132nd in pass rush grade. This is the weakest aspect of their defense here, is the lack of a pass rush. And Texas has one of the best pass protections in the country. They're 3rd in pressure rate allowed, 18th in sack rate allowed, 1st in pass blocking grade. So Quinn Ewers should theoretically have all day to throw. And Quinn Ewers' numbers are definitely better when given a clean pocket. In fact, when he's pressured, you see the QB rating dip, you see the yards per attempt dip. So, I mean, you're going to give Quinn Ewers all day to throw in this one. I personally find it hard to believe that Arizona State can keep Texas from throwing the ball. I'm not even the biggest fan of Quinn Ewers in the Texas passing attack. I've been saying all season that I think that passing attack's a little overvalued, but I mean, really don't think Arizona State with no pass rush at all is going to be able to stop them. But now, what about Texas on the ground? Now, you can point at this. Arizona State has a solid run defense. You can point at this. Texas, when they've seen top 40 rated run defenses, that's 5 games, they're averaging just 3.58 yards per carry, 40.9% success rate per rush. They've struggled to run the ball against top 40 run defenses, which describes Arizona State. Here's the problem when it comes to the Texas run game. It's impossible to try to make a prediction here. Check this out. Second half of the season, on the left side of this graphic, we have weeks 11, 13, and 14. That was against Florida, Kentucky, Texas A&M. Ran the shit out of the ball. Over 5.6 yards per carry, 54.6% success rate per rush, over 234 rushing yards per game. On the right side of this graphic, you have these games. Weeks 8, 9, 12, and 15. The SEC championship game against Georgia twice, Vanderbilt, and Arkansas. They were held to 2.38 yards per carry, 76 rushing yards per game, 36.6% success rate per rush. So on the left side, you have 3 games where the Texas run game looked absolutely dominant. On the right side, you have 4 games where Texas couldn't run the ball at all. Puts us in a tough position as far as making a prediction. And then check this out. What they do in the first round against Clemson, ran the shit out of the ball. Against Clemson, 48 carries, 292 yards on the ground, 6.2 yards per carry, 4 rushing touchdowns. One of their most explosive rushing games of the entire season against Clemson in the first round of the college football playoff. So again, definitely tough to make a prediction when it comes to Texas running the ball. We've seen games where they've been completely shut down. We've also seen games like this one against Clemson where they could not be stopped at all. So I really don't know what to expect when it comes to Texas running the ball. I will say Arizona State's defense against the run seemed to be trending the wrong direction the entire second half of the season. Through their first 6 games, they were allowing just 3.29 yards per carry, 38.5% success rate per rush, under 105 rushing yards allowed per game. In their last 7 games, the numbers don't look nearly as good. Up over 4.5 yards per carry, success rate up close to 42%, almost 132 rushing yards allowed per game. Not that these are terrible, but not nearly as good defending the run in the second half of the season as they were in the first half of the season. So personally, I think Texas can probably run the ball in this game, but I wouldn't put my money on that because, like I said, the Texas run game's been pretty inconsistent. As a whole on this side of the ball, I think Texas offensively should be fine. Quinn Ewers, like I said, should have all day to throw. They could probably run the ball a little bit, so Texas should be able to score points in this one. Now, what do we think about the matchup on the other side here? We have Arizona State's offense. Obviously, as I'm sure you know, this is an offense that wants to run the football. They're 12th in rushing frequency. Their offense runs through Cam Scattaboo, and if you saw the quote he made, I mean, he's setting himself up to either look like the man or to look stupid on social media. He said, and I quote, "They continue to keep saying that people are going to try to stop me. There's nobody out there that can stop me," before playing Texas in a college football playoff game. It's a ballsy quote. You got to give him credit. It's a ballsy quote. That being said, he is on an absolute heater right now. In his last 8 games, he's averaging over 207 yards from scrimmage per game. Over 207 yards per game. And when it comes to this heater that Cam Scattaboo is on right now, you can't say that he's done it against nobody because in their last 8 games, they've played 3 top 25 defenses. Utah's defense is 9th, Kansas State 25th, BYU 19th. So in the middle of this hot streak for Cam Scattaboo, he's done it against 3 top 25 defenses. There's a few really bad defenses in there as well, but there's 3 top 25 defenses. That being said, we have to ask, are any of these defenses on Texas level? And the answer is probably not. Texas leads the country in yards per play allowed. First in yards per play allowed, 21st in success rate. Look at their numbers against the pass. They're absolutely elite. They're first in DFEI. So yeah, good old Cam is going to have his hands full trying to live up to that promise, or live up to that quote he made, I should say. Now, we can't just sleep on the Arizona State offense, though. They're 21st in yards per play, 11th in success rate. Rushing numbers obviously great with Scattaboo, 37th and 11th. Passing numbers look great, too, 11th and 20th. So this is a dangerous offense. So will Scattaboo be able to run the ball in this Texas defense? Well, surprisingly, Texas has only played 2 games this year against top 20 rated rushing attacks, Michigan and Texas A&M, and actually they played great. In both of those games, they held those 2 opponents to just 3.29 yards per carry, 31% success rate per rush, just 92 rushing yards per game. So the 2 best rushing attacks on paper that Texas has seen so far this year, Texas was able to shut both of them down. And also, what they do against Clemson in the first round of the playoff, 3.2 yards per carry. So Clemson was unable to run the ball in Texas as well. And Arizona State, as dynamic as this rushing attack has looked so far this year, they've only played one game against a top 20 run defense, and it was Kansas State. Held them to 3.24 yards per carry, success rate under 37%, just 123 rushing yards in that game. So Arizona State was really struggling to run the ball against Kansas State. Now, they were able to throw the ball in that game, and we'll get to that in a second. And also, we do want to point out, okay, they struggled to run the ball in the Kansas State game. In all their other games, they average over 207 rushing yards per game, 50.8% success rate per rush, over 5 yards per carry. So this is a very good rushing attack. Are they able to run the ball in Texas? It's a tough call. I do think they'll be able to run it a little bit. 5 yards per carry, probably not. But this run game is proven pretty tough to stop. So I wouldn't be surprised if Arizona State could average 4.2, 4.3 yards per carry in this game. Now, what about the matchup for Sam Leavitt? Now, you might look at this kid and think, no way he can make throws on Texas. And I mean, I get it. Coming into the year, I didn't think he was going to be very good. His numbers on the season look pretty good. 8.5 yards per pass attempt, 21 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. But this is a Texas defense that's held opponents to just 5.15 yards per pass attempt this year, 34% success rate per dropback, just 143 passing yards allowed per game. So you look at this graphic right here. How can we possibly expect Sam Leavitt to throw the ball on this Texas defense? Well, check this out. Sam Leavitt is a gamer. Arizona State has played 3 games this year against top 15 rated pass defenses. 3 games against top 15 rated pass defenses. How did Leavitt do in those 3 games? Well, he cooked. It was 3 of his best games of the season, or the toughest defenses. This kid is just a gamer. He rises to the challenge. He plays great against great defenses. In those 3 games against top 15 pass defenses, over 249 passing yards per game, 11.7 yards per pass attempt, success rate over 55% per dropback. That's against top 15 rated pass defenses. This kid, Sam Leavitt, he's made me a believer over the year. This kid's magic, man. He's got great escapability out of the pocket. He handles pressure well, which is probably what we should talk about next, because you might be looking at this graphic saying, Kyle, I don't care what Sam Leavitt did against these other top 15 defenses. The Texas pass rush is going to be all over him. And that's a fair point. Texas pass rush is crazy. On the season, they're 9th in pressure rate, 8th in sack rate, 4th in pass rush grade. Couple things here, though. Number one, Arizona State's offensive line's been pretty solid in pass protection this year. 37th in pressure rate allowed, 27th in sack rate, 10th in pass block grade. Number two, like I said, this kid's got great escapability. He's actually been one of the best quarterbacks in college football when pressured this year. A+ yards per attempt, A+ turnover-worthy play rate. That's when pressured. This kid is just magic. I don't know where he came from. I actually thought he was going to be terrible this year. He has really impressed me. He shows up in these big games. And let's not pretend like the idea of throwing the ball in this Texas defense is just unfathomable. We just saw Cade Klubnik do it in the first round. Cade Klubnik, 26 of 43, 336 yards, 3 touchdowns a pick, 7.8 yards per attempt. Cade Klubnik actually looked great in that game. He had no problems making throws against, I shouldn't say no problems, because he was excellent. He had to make some really tight throws, but Cade Klubnik looked excellent against Texas. Now, one thing that definitely does concern me a little bit here for Sam Leavitt is Texas runs mostly zone coverage, 25th in the country in zone coverage frequency. They're very good at it. I mean, look at the left side of this graphic. It's all green. Top 3, maybe the best zone coverage in the country. Sam Leavitt has been much better throwing the ball against man. Against man coverage, he's pretty much top 25 in everything. Against zone coverage, not at all. So if you're looking to bet Texas, you love this right here, that Texas is going to send that pass rush, sit in zone coverage where Sam Leavitt has struggled a little bit against. The question is that enough for me to lay 12.5 points in this one with Texas? And the answer is no. I can't do it. I can't lay 12.5. I'm scared of the Arizona State defense. I'm scared to take the points, but why don't we just take an over here? I've been basically blindly betting Arizona State overs for pretty much the entire second half of the season. They're 5-1 to the over in their last 6 games. Arizona State games just always seem to go over. So rather than try to pick a side, I'm definitely just going to take the over here. As far as picking a side against the spread, I guess I would lean towards Arizona State, but I am terrified of that defense trying to stop Texas running the ball, trying to put pressure on Quinn Ewers. I can't get there with the Arizona State defense. So give me the over. As far as a side, I guess, put a gun to my head, I guess I would lean Arizona State, but I'm not going to do it. Over. Next game. Ohio State, Oregon. This one is at the Rose Bowl. Ducks are catching 2.5 points here. Oregon plus 2.5. Total sitting at 55.5 across the board. Take a look at the donut charts here. According to the data, actions coming in on the Oregon side. Over 60% of the tickets, over 55% of the money. As I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup, and we'll start with the Week 7 game on the road for Ohio State at Eugene. Probably the best or one of the best college football games of the year. Came down to the last second. Will Howard, clock runs out before they can get the game-winning field goal up. 32-31 final. I loved it. I was on Oregon plus 3.5, so I enjoyed every second of the game. Truly was one of the best college football games of the season this year. That one was, like I said, on the road in Eugene. This is obviously at a neutral site. So will we see a repeat of that shootout? Well, here's the matchup for the Ohio State offense here. They're 4th in yards per play, 9th in success rate against Oregon's defense, 13th and 25th. So I guess slight edge to Ohio State offensively here. I will say, look at the bottom right of this graphic. You got Oregon's numbers against the pass on the season. 5th in yards per pass attempt allowed, 5th in success rate per dropback, 15th in effective pass. Elite numbers against the pass. That being said, Will Howard had no problems whatsoever throwing the ball in this Oregon defense back in Week 7. He went on the road to Eugene, 28 of 35, 326 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks, pass rating over 177. He was excellent, had no problems at all throwing the ball in this Oregon defense. Now, you might look at the rest of Oregon's season and say, Kyle, that's an outlier. And I mean, I would get your point there. Week 7 against Ohio State, the numbers, we just went through them. Will Howard threw the ball all over them. In their other 12 games this year, they're holding opponents to 5.74 yards per pass attempt. Success rate down at 31%. So you look at this graphic and you're like, Kyle, that's an outlier. No way Will Howard can do that to Oregon's defense again. But then you look at what Will Howard did to Tennessee's defense, one of the best defenses in the country. 24 of 29, 311 yards, 2 touchdowns, a pick, passer rating over 188. So I don't know if that's an outlier. I think Ohio State's passing attack might just be that good. Now, you can point at the Oregon pass rush. It is the strength of their defense, or one of the strengths of their defense. They're 4th in pressure rate, 20th in sack rate, 8th in pass rush grade. Will Howard, you can shake him with some pressure. I mean, we definitely see a dip in production when Will Howard experiences pressure. So Oregon's pass rush should be a factor here, right? Except the first time these two teams met back in Week 7, Oregon pressured Will Howard on just 31.1% of his dropbacks. That's really not a lot. He was the 52nd most pressured quarterback in college football that week. It's a very average amount of pressure. And then last week against Tennessee, one of the best defensive fronts in the country, Will Howard was pressured on just 25.8% of his dropbacks. So these defensive fronts are really struggling to get pressure on Will Howard. I don't know how much of a factor this Oregon pass rush is going to be. Now, back in Week 7, Oregon was able to limit the Ohio State run game a little bit. 4.27 yards per carry, 141 yards on the ground, success rate just over 40%. These numbers aren't bad, but they're not great. They were at least able to slow down the Ohio State run game a little bit. And that's kind of a pattern we've seen from Ohio State this year in their 6 games against top 20 defenses, which is crazy, by the way. They've played 6 games against top 20 defenses this year. In their 6 games against top 20 rated defenses, they're throwing the ball fine. Will Howard can throw the ball on anybody, but the run game, 3.95 yards per carry, 43.8% success rate per rush, just under 130 rushing yards per game. So they have struggled to get the run game going a little bit when they've seen tough defenses. So maybe they're able to limit the Ohio State run game again. But here's the thing. If you isolate Oregon's games to just when they've seen elite offenses, they've played 3 games this year against top 15 offenses. They actually couldn't stop the run in any of them. Ohio State was pretty much the only one where they were able to stop the run. Boise State was able to run the ball on Oregon. Penn State ran the ball all over Oregon. So I actually think Ohio State might run the ball on Oregon too. You look at the metrics from Oregon's defensive front, and as I said before, the pass rush is elite, but look at the left side. This is not the greatest defensive front in terms of staying on the line of scrimmage. Ohio State should be able to generate some push. So even though they were only able to run the ball a little bit in their last meeting back in Week 7, I think Ohio State's going to be able to run the ball in this game too. So Will Howard should be able to throw the ball. Ohio State should be able to run the ball. We should see some Buckeyes points. But before you go and hammer Ohio State, we have to take a look at the matchup on the other side, and this is about as elite as it gets here. Ohio State's defense against Oregon's offense. This very well may be the best offense in college football against the best defense in college football. Ohio State 2nd in yards per play, 1st in success rate. Oregon's offense 6th and 4th. Look at the Oregon passing numbers against the Ohio State pass defense numbers. 9th, 6th, and 5th against 5th, 2nd, and 3rd. Like I said, this is about as elite as it gets here. The Oregon offense against the Ohio State defense. As I'm sure you know, Dylan Gabriel having a monster season, over 3,200 yards, 8.7 yards per attempt, 24 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. He's been unstoppable, and he had no problems moving the ball on Ohio State in their first matchup back in Week 7. Threw for 341 yards, 10 yards per attempt, over 44% success rate per dropback. They were also able to run the ball on Ohio State 5 yards per carry, 41.9% success rate per rush, 155 yards on the ground. And you can kind of take the same thing I said about Oregon's defense, copy and paste it about Ohio State's defense. This may be an outlier here. Week 7 on the road in Oregon, they allowed 32 points over 7.6 yards per play. Look at their other 11 regular season games, 10.9 points per game. In their other 11 regular season games, they allowed 10.9 points per game. 4.1 yards per play is crazy. Success rate at 34%. And how did they follow that regular season up? Well, they played Tennessee in the first round, held them to 17 points, 3.66 yards per play. 3.66 yards per play. Tennessee couldn't move the ball at all. On the season, Tennessee averages 8.2 yards per pass attempt, 49.4% success rate per dropback. Against Ohio State, Nico was 14 of 31, 104 yards with a 73 passer rating. Nico was in prison here against Ohio State. So we kind of have a bit of the same situation here on both sides of the ball. Both these defenses are elite. The outlier is when they played each other. So you might be thinking, all right, well, Dylan Gabriel's just going to carve up Ohio State's defense again, just like he did before. I will say I'm more leaning towards Ohio State's defense bouncing back and slowing Dylan Gabriel down than I am Oregon's defense bouncing back and slowing Will Howard down. The reason being, we've only seen this Ohio State passing attack stumble once. Just one time in the season finale against Michigan. That was it. That was the only game where we've seen Will Howard not absolutely carve a defense up. They went off in every single other game. Meanwhile, on the Oregon side, don't get me wrong, Dylan Gabriel's been excellent. They have some elite-looking numbers. We've seen this offense look shaky here and there. I mean, a few times. First, there were those couple ugly games early in the season, and then they got that ironed out. But even recently, weeks 11 and 12 against Maryland and Minnesota, 6.2 yards per pass attempt, 40.3% success rate per dropback, just 200 passing yards per game. We've seen this Oregon passing attack stumble a lot more than we've seen the Ohio State passing attack stumble. So as far as answering the question of will we see that same sort of shootout again, I think Will Howard is more likely to duplicate that performance more so than Dylan Gabriel is. Keep in mind, that game was at home in Eugene for Dylan Gabriel, so that was a road game for Will Howard. We've only seen Will Howard stumble once. We've seen Dylan Gabriel look shaky in a few games this year, so I think Will Howard's going to go off, and I think there's more of a chance of Dylan Gabriel stumbling a little bit. Now, answering the question of will Oregon be able to run the ball on Ohio State again, that's a little bit tougher to answer because you look at this graphic here, and this is kind of cool. So Oregon, we've seen the run game struggle a few times this year. This isn't the most dynamic rushing attack in the world, but the 4 times they saw top 20 run defenses, they actually showed up. 50.4% success rate per rush, 4.27 yards per carry. These are their numbers specifically against top 20 run defenses. So Oregon's run game, although it's not the best, showed up when they saw tough run defenses. So that leads me to believe, okay, they're able to run the ball on Ohio State because they ran the ball on Penn State. They ran the ball on these elite run defenses. But then you look at this and you're like, well, shit, nobody can run the ball on Ohio State. Maybe that was an outlier. Week 7 on the road in Eugene, 5 yards per carry allowed. Rest of the regular season, 2.69 yards per carry allowed, under 92 rushing yards allowed per game. And then in the first round against Tennessee, who has a very good rushing attack, 3.9 yards per carry. I mean, they were able to run the ball a very little bit. I don't know. Maybe Oregon's able to run the ball on Ohio State a little bit, and I'm sure Dylan Gabriel will make plenty of plays. He's one of the best in the country. But as a whole, I think I got to go Buckeyes here. I like Ohio State to score points. This one is not in Eugene. It's at a neutral site. I feel like they're the stronger team, and I feel like the defense is going to bounce back. I feel like the defense has a better chance of bouncing back from week 7 than the Oregon defense does. So I'm going to lay the 2.5. Give me the Buckeyes. I'm not mad at an Ohio State team total over either, but Ohio State minus 2.5. Next game, Notre Dame, Georgia. This one's at the Superdome in New Orleans. Georgia laying 1 or 1.5, depending on your sportsbook. Total sitting at 45 or 45.5. Let's take a look at the pie charts, and according to the data, action seems to be coming in pretty heavily on the Georgia side. Over 60% of the tickets, over 70% of the money. As I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup, and we'll start with the Notre Dame offense against the Georgia defense, and this should be a battle on this side of the ball. Notre Dame 6th in yards per play, 31st in success rate. Georgia's defense 38th and 31st. According to FEI ratings, Notre Dame's offense is 9th. Georgia's defense is 13th. So this should be a really good matchup on this side of the ball. Something that concerns me a little bit for Notre Dame's offense is we know this is a unit that wants to run the ball, right? On the season, they're averaging 6.4 yards per carry, 47.9% success rate per rush, over 225 rushing yards per game. but the 2 times they saw top 20 rated defenses, just 4.24 yards per carry, 40.7% success rate per rush, 144 rushing yards per game. Not that these numbers on the right are completely bad, but it's definitely a little bit concerning considering this is an offense that needs to run the ball, so run first offense all the way, and both times they saw top 20 run defenses, the run game wasn't all that potent. Even last week's game against Indiana was a little bit deceiving. You look at the final box score, they averaged 5.5 yards per carry. They had a 98-yard touchdown. Jeremiah Lovett, a 98-yard touchdown run in that game. If you take that one run out, they had 34 carries for 95 yards. 2.7 yards per carry. Not saying the 98-yard touchdown run doesn't count, but to answer the question, was Notre Dame consistently running the ball in Indiana? The answer is no. And look what this Georgia defensive front did to Texas in the SEC championship game. This is Texas, 1.11 yard per carry. Yard, not yards per carry, yard. 1.11 yard per carry. They held them to 31 yards rushing. Success rate per rush under 32%. Texas couldn't do shit on the ground against Georgia. So at this point, we're thinking there's no way Notre Dame's going to be able to run the ball in this game. But hold on. If you do like Notre Dame, I do have something for you. There is something we've seen Georgia's defense struggle with throughout the year several times. 3 different games we saw Georgia struggling with this. Mobile quarterbacks. Jalen Milroe had 117 yards on 7.3 yards per carry. Jackson Dart, 50 yards on 6.3 yards per carry. Haynes King, 110 yards on 4.6 yards per carry. And it wasn't just those mobile quarterbacks on the ground either. Those 3 guys were able to do some damage through the air as well. Jalen Milroe, Jackson Dart, Haynes King all had successful days throwing the ball against Georgia. So mobile quarterbacks might be a problem for this Georgia defense. In case you haven't watched any Notre Dame football this year, Riley Leonard is most definitely a mobile quarterback. He's got over 750 rushing yards, 15 rushing touchdowns, 5.6 yards per carry on the season. So you definitely like that if you're betting Notre Dame here. We've seen this Georgia defense struggle with mobile quarterbacks several times this year. Riley Leonard, most definitely a mobile quarterback. Here's the thing. If you look at Georgia's game logs on the full season, they didn't struggle every time they saw a mobile quarterback. I mean, there are some mobile quarterbacks they played well against. Mississippi State with Van Buren, he can run. He didn't really do much damage on the ground against Georgia. DJ Lagway also played pretty well against Georgia. Forgot to mention him. He got hurt in the second quarter, but that's another name that helps your argument on the Notre Dame side. But Nico, Tennessee, definitely a mobile quarterback. He really didn't do much against Georgia. So it's not that every time Georgia saw a mobile quarterback, they struggled, but we did see a few times where they did struggle against mobile quarterbacks. So do we think Riley Leonard's going to be able to throw the ball in this game? Because as we just pointed out, we have seen mobile quarterbacks have successful days throwing the ball on this Georgia defense. So do we think Riley Leonard can do it? On the season, as I'm sure you probably know, not the best year throwing the football. He has been better in the second half of the season, though. Still not great. By no means does Notre Dame have a great passing attack. It's just been better in the second half of the year. In the first round of the playoffs against Indiana, I mean, it was okay. Indiana obviously has a great defense. Questionable competition they played throughout the year. Indiana obviously has a great defense. Riley Leonard completed 71% of his passes, 201 yards through the air, 6.3 yards per attempt. I mean, not that that's a bad day, but it's not a good day. It's not a great day either. What worries me a little for Riley Leonard here is the pass protection. Now, you might be looking at this graphic saying, Kyle, it doesn't look that bad. 31st in pressure rate allowed, 16th in sack rate allowed, 66th in pass blocking grade. That doesn't look all that bad. Keep in mind, Notre Dame has only played 2 games all year against top 25 pass rushes. The first one was week 5 against Louisville. Riley Leonard was pressured on 40% of his dropbacks. That's a lot. And the second one was in the first round against Indiana. Riley Leonard was pressured on 45% of his dropbacks. So you look at the Notre Dame pass protection numbers on the year, it looks like they have a pretty decent pass protection, but both times they saw a top 25 pass rush, Riley Leonard was under pressure. And we have not seen Riley Leonard make a ton of plays with his arm under pressure this year. His escapability is good. Obviously, he's a great athlete. Pressure to sack rate looks fine. He doesn't take a ton of sacks. Like I said, he can escape the pocket, but QB rating and yards per attempt take a huge dip under pressure. So he hasn't made a ton of throws under pressure this year. So I'm having a hard time believing that Riley Leonard is going to throw the ball on this Georgia defense. And this is a Georgia defense this is how crazy the SEC is. This entire season, Georgia has only played 4 games against passing attacks that aren't ranked in the top 40. So 9 of Georgia's 13 football games this year have been against top 40 passing attacks. In their 4 games against passing attacks not rated in the top 40, they allowed just 106 passing yards per game. 106 passing yards per game, 4.73 yards per pass attempt, success rate per dropback under 28%. Now, one of those games was against an FCS program, Tennessee Tech, but even if you take Tennessee Tech out, we're still talking about 5.5 yards per attempt, success rate under 35%, just 135 passing yards allowed per game. Bottom line, bad passing attacks have not been able to throw the ball at all on Georgia. Now, would I call Notre Dame's passing attack bad? Not necessarily, but I definitely wouldn't call it good. So I really seriously doubt Riley Leonard's going to be able to throw the ball consistently on Georgia's defense. As far as the rushing attack, I mean, as a whole on this side of the field, can't say I have a ton of faith in Notre Dame offensively. I do think the dual threat quarterback will give them some problems. I think Notre Dame can move the chains on the ground a little bit, but as a whole, it should be a struggle for the Irish offense here. Now, what about the matchup on the other side? We got the Georgia offense, and right off the bat, we really don't know what we're going to expect here. Yeah, on the season, they're 22nd in pass frequency. They're a pass-first offense all the way, but their quarterback, Carson Beck, is not playing in this game. So when you look at this graphic right here, I'm starting to think that Notre Dame's defense may have a considerable edge in this game. Their defense is 5th in yards per play allowed, 12th in success rate. Georgia's offense is 44th and 23rd. And look at the bottom right. The strength of this Georgia offense is the passing attack. 40th in yards per pass attempt, 18th in success rate per dropback, 3rd in effective pass. They're missing their quarterback. We have a backup quarterback playing in this game. So if the passing attack takes a step backwards, I think Notre Dame's defense is going to be a tough matchup for Georgia. And it's huge that this is not a home game for Georgia because this offense has been so much better. In their Power 4 games played in the state of Georgia, they're averaging 36.2 points per game, success rate over 48%, 6.75 yards per play. In their games not played in the state of Georgia, down to 24 points per game, 5.6 yards per play, success rate down as well. This offense hasn't played nearly as good outside the state of Georgia. And if you're thinking, oh, well, maybe they played a tougher schedule in those games. No, that's not the case. In fact, if you compare the defensive rankings, here are the teams they played in Athens or Atlanta. I mean, 21st, 30th, 110th, 4th, 45th, 1st. Their games they played outside the state of Georgia, 38th, 8th, 1st, 37th, 7th. So the strength of schedule is pretty comparable. This team just plays a lot better in Georgia. This game is not in Georgia. It's in Louisiana. So what can we expect from Gunnar Stockton in this game? Well, to be honest, I have no freaking clue. He did play the entire second half of the Texas game, the SEC championship game. He was 12 of 16, just 71 yards. That's 4.4 yards per pass attempt, no touchdowns, a pick. And he's matched up against a Notre Dame defense that's allowed 5.39 yards per pass attempt, 27.1% success rate per dropback on the season, less than 158 passing yards per game. Gunnar Stockton better bring his A game because he is in for one here. Did you see what this Notre Dame defense did to Curtis Rourke in the first round of the college football playoff? Keep in mind, Curtis Rourke in the Indiana passing attack, one of the most explosive in college football this season. Yes, I'm aware that they had a questionable schedule. They didn't play the strongest competition, but no question, that's an explosive passing attack. If you take out the 2 garbage time drives at the end where Notre Dame was up big, he was 9 of 19, 94 yards, no touchdown, a pick, 4.9 yards per attempt. That's what Notre Dame did to Curtis Rourke in the Indiana passing attack. We're talking about a backup quarterback here. Now, I want to be very clear here. I don't want it to sound like I'm saying this kid sucks. That's not what I'm saying. He's the backup at Georgia. I'm sure he's loaded with talent. I'm sure he's capable of throwing the ball all over the field. But the truth is, he hasn't played this whole year. His first start is going to be in a college football playoff game against Notre Dame's defense. Just not a spot I'm overly confident in. The battle on the line of scrimmage in this one is going to be huge. Notre Dame's pass rush against Georgia's offensive line. Both these units top 25, maybe even top 10. Notre Dame's 17th in pressure rate, 15th in sack rate, 25th in pass rush grade. Georgia's offensive line 13th, 20th, and 11th. So whoever wins this battle, that's going to be huge because Gunnar Stockton under pressure may be a situation. In the Texas game, he was pressured on just 6 dropbacks. 6. He was 1 of 3, 14 yards and a pick in those dropbacks. So Georgia needs to do everything they can to keep this kid protected. That being said, when given a clean pocket, he was 11 of 13, 4.4 yards per attempt. So he didn't throw the ball downfield at all. He was taking underneath throws. 4.4 yards per attempt is not efficient at all. So yeah, like I keep saying, I don't have a lot of faith in Gunnar Stockton throwing the ball in Notre Dame. And what makes this matchup even scarier for Georgia's offense is I don't think they're capable of giving him run support. They played 8 games this year against top 20 run defenses. In those games, 3.57 yards per carry, under 112 rushing yards per game, 44.1% success rate per rush. Actually isn't bad. That's okay. But 3.57 yards per carry. When you've got a quarterback making his first start against Notre Dame, you're going to need more than that. And this Notre Dame defensive front is coming off a monster game. Last game of the year, USC was able to run the ball on them. Over 7 yards per carry. Looks like it was a wake-up call because in the first round of the playoffs, they shut Indiana's run game down. 27 carries, 63 yards, 2.3 yards per carry. Against a Georgia run game that really hasn't been all that good. It really hasn't been consistent at all. So I don't think they're able to give Gunnar Stockton run support either, which is why, as much as I would love to fade Notre Dame here, I just can't do it. I can't be laying a point. I can't be laying a point and a half with Georgia here. I don't know how this offense moves the ball. I saw Texas dismantle this offense twice. Georgia was able to win both games because of their defense, but I don't think this Georgia offense is very good to begin with, let alone with Gunnar Stockton at quarterback. So I am not backing Georgia here. Not really that thrilled with the matchup for Notre Dame's offense either, though. I took the under at 45.5. If I'm forced to pick a side, I would have to pick Notre Dame here. In fact, I could see myself throwing a few dollars on Notre Dame before kickoff, but as of right now, the bet I have down is under 45.5. I think both teams are going to try to establish the run, and both teams are going to struggle to do so. Clock should be rolling. I expect a defensive game here. Give me the under with a lean towards Notre Dame. Live shows at 11 a.m. Eastern time. We'll go through these games. We'll go through some college basketball. Toast is on a heater right now. Go through some NBA. That's at 11 a.m. Eastern time. If you're able to make it, would love to see you in the comments. Hit me up in the Discord if you need me. Please remember to bet responsibly. Happy New Year to you all. Cannot thank you guys enough for the continued support. We grew a lot this year, the channel, and changed my life. I really love doing these videos and appreciate the support. Appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day to watch. So yeah, here's to another great year at the Sauce Network. Please remember to bet responsibly again. Hit me up in the Discord.